بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والفجر وليال عشر والشمس والوتر والليل إذا يسر هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بعاد إرم ذات العماد التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد وثمود الذين جابوا الصخر بالواد وفرعون ذي الأوتاد الذين طغوا في البلاد فأكثروا فيها الفساد فصب عليهم ربك صوت عذاب إن ربك لبالمرصاد فأما الإنسان إذا ما ابتلاه ربه فأكرمه ونعمه فيقول ربي أكرمن وأما إذا ما ابتلاه فقدر عليه رزقه فيقول ربي أهانن كلا بل لا تكرمون اليتيم ولا تحاضون على طعام المسكين وتأكلون التراث أكلا لما وتحبون المال حبا جما كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا وجاء ربك والملك صفا صفا وجيء يومئذ بجهنم يومئذ يتذكر الإنسان وأنى له الذكرى يقول يا ليتني قدمت لحياتي فيومئذ لا يعذب عذابه أحد ولا يوثق وثاقه أحد يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون. لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون. إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون. وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون. وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون. إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم. إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين. واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون. قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون. قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين. قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم. قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون. وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون. أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون. إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين. إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون. قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون. بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين. إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون. يا حسرة على العباد ما يعتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالأرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم. ولقد عذل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون. هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون. اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون. ولو نشاء لتمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون. ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون. ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون. وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين. أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون. وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون. واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون. لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون. فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون. أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين. وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم. قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم. الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون. أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم. إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
तेरी ज़ैनब लुट रही है अज़ीज़ो तुम कहाँ हो सूए कूफा मेरे हाशिम के जवानों, जुल्म से हमको बचाएं।
नौके नेज़ा सज चुकी है, बीबियों की वारदाएं।
हम पे हर शय रो रही है, अज़ीज़ो तुम कहाँ हो।
हमको दुर्रों से बचाए, कोई एक हो तो सुन लेनो।
दश्ते गुर्बत कर रही है, आज हम पर खुद भी गिरिया। मेरी दुनिया लुट रही है, अज़ीज़ो
तुम कहाँ हो।
जिसको महमिल में सजा कर लाई थी मैं हूँ वो ज़ैनब।
अपनी निगरानी में रख कर लाई थी मैं हूँ वो ज़ैनब।
आज तन्हा हो गई है, अज़ीज़ो तुम कहाँ हो।
मेरे बाबा मेरे बाबा शिमर मुझको है डराता।
सूए मकतल रोके देती है सदा मेरी सकीना। खाक पे सो ना सकी है, अज़ीज़ो तुम कहाँ हो। तेरी ज़ैनब लुट रही है, अज़ीज़ो तुम कहाँ हो। सूए कूफा जा रही है, अज़ीज़ो तुम कहाँ हो।
मोहम्मद व आल मोहम्मद सलावत। सूरत अल मुबारकत अल फातिहा।
Dr. Sayyid Shabbir Kirmani, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Surah Fatiha is requested for the Isala Sawab of Marhumeen listed on the screen and for all the Marhumeen Al-Fatiha. Amma Yujibu is requested for the names listed on the screen and for all those in need here and elsewhere. Let us recite together. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Amma yujibu al-mustara idha da'ahu wa yakshifu su'. Amma yujibu al-mustara idha da'ahu wa yakshifu su'. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. Future of education, college or not. Join us with Dr. Sayyid Shabbir Kirmani on Saturday, January 17th at 10 a.m. for a practical and unbiased look at modern learning options for students, parents, and career changers. New pathways for the next generation. For more information or to register, please visit the links displayed on the screen. At this time, I would like to call Dr. Sayyid Shabbir Kirmani for tonight's lecture with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, here or across the globe, wherever you may be hearing my voice, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: what is the beautiful struggle? When we come to look at the Qur'an, you'll find that the Qur'an teaches us many things, but one of the things it teaches us is how to think, how to frame our work, our life. And what you find about that is, and how important that is sometimes we need to understand who we are. Sometimes people ask a question, which is a very good question, and if I can frame this for you in a way that may help myself as well as others, sometimes people ask, how do I understand the Qur'an? And one of the most important aspects of looking at this question, as it relates to looking at the Qur'an and the Ahlul Bayt and the personality we are here to commemorate today, is another way of thinking about this question, if you look at it in light of the idea that, man arafa nafsa arafa rabba. We have to understand the framework of our world and our understanding and what Allah wants, Allah's framework, God's framework, Almighty, Jalla Jalaluhu. And another way of thinking of this question is, I don't understand the Qur'an. You may be saying, and you don't realize it that way, but you may be asking the question, maybe thinking, how does this relate? But another way to consider it is, when you look at the Qur'an and you ask, how do I understand the Qur'an, or I don't understand the Qur'an, you may also be saying, I don't understand myself. And the reality of that is because those attributes that exist within the Qur'an is a framework that Allah may be telling us and is inviting us to reflect on our own minds and how we think. For example, if you read the story of Yusuf in the Qur'an, Allah goes through painstaking detail not to just talk about what was said between people, what was said between Yaqub and Yusuf, what was said between Yusuf and his brothers, what was said between the brothers and Yaqub, their father, what was said between this person and that person. God also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also goes on to tell the inner thoughts that people have. What's in your mind, what's in your heart. So when I don't understand this, one aspect that Allah's framework, Allah is trying to invite us to understand that framework. And when we understand the framework of seeing the divine picture, you see things different. When I say this, because when we look at this term, ma ra'aytu illa jamila, I saw nothing but beauty, the way we interpret this statement from Bibi Zaynab is very different based on how we look at our world and what we consider beauty. Recall, a couple of nights ago, I've mentioned to you that if you want to know the ayah, وَلَئِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ, as the Qur'an says, if you are grateful, we will increase it. What does it mean in this context? We may think, what our world's drift pushes us towards or directs us towards. And the drift of our world directs us towards certain things, fame and fortune, for example. The drift of our world makes us go towards certain things. But when it comes to this, Allama Tabatabai says in Al-Mizan, no, hold on a second. The it is not just the material, it's something much greater than that. So, he says that the it that's being referred to here in this context, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala seems to be suggesting that if you are grateful, He will increase it which is your spiritual capacity for excellence, for kamal, which encapsulates everything. It's the one thing that will give you everything else. And so, number two, when it comes to this, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Allama Tabatabai explaining this concept, we're talking about, our topic here is Bibi Zainab as a lioness in the Qur'anic model of resilience. And I have this thesis which I wanted to share, that the traits that the Ahlul Bayt teach us, and this is different than what I sort of heard growing up in majalises or lectures or even hearing. And sometimes you would hear the majalis and you would get this perception that the Ahlul Bayt were always struggling in life. But I want to actually share with you how they give us the ability to succeed not only in the akhirah, but in this world in particular. Recall the ayah that I recited at the beginning is the famous ayah from Surah Baqarah, where Allah says, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ. Wala, the lam at-ta'qid, this lam, when it comes in the Qur'an, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّ, there's a lam of emphasis that comes in places in the Qur'an. When it comes in places in the Qur'an, that indicates that this is a guarantee. Not like a government saying that we guarantee this money. They could default on it, a country. It's God saying, I'm guaranteeing you that this is going to happen. What? I'm guaranteeing that you're going to go and you're going to have to face challenges. وَنَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ. You will be tested. With what? Khawf, fear, ju', hunger, naqs min al-amwal, loss of wealth. Wal-anfus, yourselves. Wa-thamarat, and your fruits. That could be the most valuable things to you. Their family, your children, whatever it is. You're going to be tested. And so now, when Allah says this is not something to demoralize us, because now Allama Tabatabai says something beautiful, and he says, when it comes to the existence of good, you know what he says? In Allah's creation, the same way that they say in science, there's an argument within science, that what is darkness? And they say darkness is nothing itself. It doesn't exist. Darkness is the absence of light. So where there's not light, there's darkness. Similarly, Allama Tabatabai says, in Allah's creation, there's no evil. There's only khair. Allah created good. And what ends up happening in life is that absence of good, the absence of khair, the absence of what Allah created, creates what we call evil. Are you with me? And so when you understand the statement of Jamila, ma ra'aytu illa Jamila in the Qur'anic context, it opens up doors for the next world and this world that you and I may never have fathomed. Allow me to explain. When the Qur'an actually uses the word Jamila or Jamil, it says sabran jamil, for example. Beautiful patience. Have you ever heard of beautiful struggle? Believe it or not, and it's very difficult when someone's going through it, believe me. But if you look back in life, those moments of struggle that you may have faced and you were able to overcome with Allah's help and the help that Allah enabled you to overcome with, you find that sometimes those are the moments of your growth, and you may find that that's when you are most alive. When life has no challenges, when life has no struggles, when life has no growth within it, the same way that when a caterpillar goes into the cocoon and eventually becomes a moth or a butterfly, similarly, those difficult moments are things that allow us and enable us to grow. Similarly, when it comes to this dynamic, Bibi Zaynab exemplifies the stories that you'll find in the Qur'an of the patience of Yusuf at times, where Yusuf was betrayed, Yusuf was thrown into wells, Yusuf was thrown into prison unjustly, sold into slavery, you name it. Or the examples of Ayyub, the sabr of Ayyub, Job in the Bible, who was patient after what he had everything, and then Shaitan says, oh, he's only doing this because he has all these gifts, but if you take it away, he won't. And so God takes one by one. But still he's grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That spiritual ascent is really valuable. For those of you who may wonder what's the value of this, I often tell you just one example of what this may benefit you here and now. A few years ago, I remember I was in Texas at the time when I was reading the news on this, for majalis, for lectures, and it came out that, Harvard University has a criteria for admissions. And there's different ways to get into Harvard. There's official ways of getting in. You're a really good student and you do the right things. There's some unofficial ways that you can get in. You have to have a lot of money. That's few people can get in that way. But there's a threshold that's not official. If you ask Ivy League professors, there's always a small amount that is dedicated to other aspects. There's sometimes legacy. Legacy is another way that if your father went or you have a relative, direct relative, you can get in. Anyways, there were some members of the Asian community who sued Harvard a few years ago for reverse discrimination. They said, you're reverse discriminating against us, because the number of Asians or Asian background people that apply to Harvard is quite high. And so they said that you're prioritizing other demographics, whereas we qualify on the basis of merit. On merit, we qualify, we should be in. Why are you reverse discriminating against us? And so you're saying that we have to have a certain amount from this demographic, from that demographic, and that demographic. You're not officially saying that, but that's what's happening. And so we, who may be qualified, we don't get a position because you've set up these barriers. So I shared this with you because after over 400 years Harvard had to release its criteria for accepting candidates. And one of the things that they had as listed as the top criteria that they look for in students was what Professor Angela Lee Duckworth at the University of Pennsylvania researched and wrote in her book. And that is grit. It's not just your grades, it's not just your, exam scores. All of those matter, but one thing above all mattered, and that was grit. Grit is classified as perseverance over a prolonged period of time. And they said that if you have this ability to have perseverance over a prolonged period of time, in every domain they found this was a common trait amongst the most successful people. In military, in business, in sports, in life. And if you ask me, there's no greater symbol of grit or perseverance over a prolonged period of time than Bibi Zaynab salamullahi alayha. And she exemplifies it in the most incredible way. In fact, her persona answers the question that people may have about women in Islam, about feminism in Islam, about power. If you want to know ability, power, courage, audacity, Zaynab salamullahi alayha. As the poet says, Mushkilon mein bajaye naam Ali, Mushkilon mein bajaye Nade Ali. Nade Ali has its place, don't get me wrong. But the poet's giving a message here. Mushkilon mein bajaye Nade Ali, main to leta hu naam Zainab ka. The idea that Zainab is, Nade Ali has its own place, but Zainab salamullahi alayha, she gives you courage in the most difficult of times. There's one battlefield that is that battlefield of the sword or the weapon or the armor or the bow and the arrow. And there's another battlefield of confidence in the face of alim. There's another confidence that is there that when the whole town and the whole city is against you. I'm sitting here and I'm in a gathering of those who have love for the Ahlul Bayt. You're talking to people who have animosity. That's a different crowd to be in front of. That's a different crowd environment to be. So the poet says, Khatm hai fasle kama, bol rahi hai Zainab. The era of bow and arrows is complete. Historically, Bibi Zainab, her 2 khutbahs in Sham and the sermons that she gave, if anything toppled the empire of Yazid, it was that. Because she turned the whole court upside down. After that, it wasn't possible to justify what he was doing. In fact, she gave such an open and shut case that after that Yazid started saying, it wasn't me who did this, Ibn Ziyad did this. He started pushing the blame on. Because she completely unveiled those ones. So the poet says, Khatm hai fasl season, kama, the kama is like, bow and arrow. Khatm hai fasl kama, the season of bow and arrows is over. Bol rahi hai Zainab. Now Zainab is speaking. It's her turn to speak. Khatm hai fasl kama, bol rahi hai Zainab. Kaun bolega jahan, bol rahi hai Zainab. Aur tiro, shamshiro, sinahon ke, sitam ke lashkar. Tiro, shamshiro, sinahon ke. That the arrows, the spears, the swords, the enemy that had all of these things, those people tried all of their things, but they couldn't stop Zainab. They had all the weaponry, they had all the ammunition, they had all the things that they needed. Khatm hai fasle kama, bol rahi hai Zainab. Kaun bolega jahan, bol rahi hai Zainab. Aur tiro, shamshiro, sinahon ke, sitam ke lashkar. Thak gayi sab ki zaban, bol rahi hai Zainab. Aur muddaton baad phir se suna hai Ali ka lehja. Kyun na jhoomegi azan, bol rahi hai Zainab. Aur ऐ यजीद इससे बड़ी हार तेरी क्या होगी, ऐ यजीद इससे बड़ी हार तेरी क्या होगी, वो तेरा घर है जहां बोल रही है ज़ैनब. ऐ यजीद इससे बड़ी हार. Oh Yazid, what greater loss of yours than the fact that that is your very home where Zainab is away. So when it comes to this Qur'anic understanding, that line that Bibi Zainab says of Ma ra'aytu illa jamila, the material lens would say that I saw, how can you say this when you saw death, you saw destruction, you saw hunger, you saw famine, you saw thirst, you saw all the things that somebody wouldn't want to see. But she wasn't looking at it from the material lens. As Allama Tabatabai highlights, she was looking at it perhaps from the divine gaze, the divine lens, which indicates that you did makr, Yazid, and Allah answered your makr through us. Allow me to explain. The brothers of Yusuf in Surah Yusuf, they did dhulm, they did evil, they did absence of good, they didn't do what Allah willed. They threw their brother out of jealousy into a well, and he was taken by a caravan passing by, and he was sold into slavery. But what is amazing about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Allah will take your own evil and use it against you. And this is where Zaynab came in and was looking at, you're just looking at the zahir, you're looking at the apparent. You think you've won, but you have no idea. God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will use your own evil against you, and exactly as that happened. I'll tell you a story. There's a scholar who I heard this from. He was in Sham. And in the place where, as you know, Damascus, in Arabic is Sham. And so he met a person. He's from, of course, a scholar from the Shia school of thought. And he was visiting. He was there for a ziyarah many, many years ago. This is years ago. And he was speaking to one of the shopkeepers. And they were saying, they were exchanging pleasantries and salam wa alaikum as-salam. And it came out that the shopkeeper, believe it or not, said that in conversation, he said that, it came out, and he was asking, where are you from, all that. Eventually he said that, I'm from the lineage of Yazid. He said, I'm from the descendants of Yazid. And he said, well, he's a little taken aback, and he was shocked by that, okay. And then after some time, he was like, well, what do you say in that situation to someone? You're just like... So he asked him a question eventually, and this is what I wanted to share with you. The shopkeeper was behind the desk or behind his, station. He said, do you revere your grandfather, or do you revere Yazid? He said the guy got up. He came behind the desk and he came next to me. And he looked at the shrine, he looked at him, and he said, every morning, every afternoon, every evening, I curse Yazid. And I give salutations on the Ahlul Bayt. He said the alim looked at the shrine, and he looked to Allah in the sky, and he said, Subhanallah, what is the power of Zaynab? That in Sham, Zaynab comes, and 1400 years later, the descendants of Yazid in his own town, in his own place, are cursing Yazid. That's the power of Zaynab, to dynamically completely shift things for all times. So now, when it comes to this, Karbala, Imam Hussein, till the moment of Asr Ashur, he fulfilled his promise, but everything shifted afterwards, and there was another need. And I want to share this beautiful line of poetry that I came across, and I just wanted to share with you. Karbala, Asr talak, Wada nibha deti hai. Asr, time of Asr, right? Asr, Zohar, Asr. Asr is the end of the day, before Maghrib. That's a time. But if you know and you recall, Asr was also the time where Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was leaving this world. That's the end of the battle of Karbala, they say, at least. Asr Ashur, that's why they typically say that. Now, keep in mind, Sham is two things. Sham means Damascus, but it also means evening, right? In Urdu, Sham is evening, for example. But Sham is also Damascus, so keep these two meanings in mind. The poet says, Karbala asr talak wada nibha deti hai. Karbala asr talak wada nibha deti hai. Sham aati hai to Zainab ko sada deti hai. Sham aati hai. The poet says, up till Asr, up to that Asr, Karbala fulfills its promise. But when Sham comes, the Sham of Sham-e-Ghariban and the Sham of Damascus, it has to call on Zainab. The poet says, Tumhare bhai ko jab deen di sada Zainab. Tumhare bhai ko jab deen di sada Zainab. Tumhare bhai ki us dam sada thi ya Zainab. Tumhare bhai ki us waqt sada thi ya Zainab. When the religion called on Hussein ibn Ali, who did Hussein ibn Ali call on? It's as if Hussein ibn Ali called on Zainab. Anyways, the point being this, the take-home message is the Qur'anic resilience. If you want to see the story of Ayyub in the Quran, and you want to see Zainab, you'll find parallels with the story of Ayyub with Zainab. Zainab, salamullahi alayha, had everything. Meaning, when she got married, she's getting married with Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar. Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar, Abdullah, the son of Ja'far al-Tayyar. Ja'far al-Tayyar was the person who was sent as the ambassador of the Prophet when they went to Abyssinia, the first migration. Before the one from Mecca to Medina was to Abyssinia when the early Muslims were being persecuted. And Ja'far al-Tayyar goes there and he recites the verses of Surah Maryam. And Najashi, the king there, begins to weep. And he draws a line in the sand and he says, the difference between Muhammad and my religion is just this line. And so at that junction, this same Ja'far al-Tayyar was killed in the battle of Mu'ta in Jordan. And at that point, when he was killed, Rasulullah said, he flies in the heavens with wings. So this custom of cutting the hands was not new. The same way Abul Fadl Abbas's hands was cut in Karbala, they also cut the hands of Ja'far al-Tayyar. Ja'far al-Tayyar, the brother of Imam Ali alayhi salam, right? Imam Ali had 4 brothers, 1 sister, right? So we have Abdullah, so we have, for example, Talib, Abu Talib, Ja'far, Aqil, Ali, and Hani. These was the sister. Ja'far al-Tayyar's son is Abdullah. And when Rasulullah came to the house of Ja'far al-Tayyar to give condolences, Abdullah was a young boy. And when he came there, there's a moment that we're told that there are some instances when your dua is accepted straight away. One circumstance is when you, as a mazloom, someone who has zulm done on them, they pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, dua is accepted straight away, number one. Number two is if you, the first time you see the Kaaba of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the house of God, and you do dua, that's accepted straight away. I was listening to, Maulana once said that, when I used to take Hajj groups 40, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 35 years ago, as soon as we'd land, people would say, Maulana, where's the Kaaba? Where's the Kaaba? Where's the Kaaba? So now they say, Maulana, where's this restaurant? Where's that restaurant? Where's pizza? Where, you fill in the blank. And so he said, times have changed, man. Times are different than what they used to be. So the second opportunity, when you go and Allah gives you the opportunity, inshallah, the Kaaba, do dua the first time, Allah will inshallah accept it. The third is if you put your hand with affection on the head of an orphan, and you pray, of course, for them, but then you also pray for yourself, that dua is accepted straight away. When Rasulullah came for condolences to the house of Ja'far al-Tayyar, Abdullah was a young boy. Abdullah, at that moment, was seemingly playing with some, paper or something like this. And Rasulullah asked him, young man, one aspect that we don't talk perhaps about Rasulullah as much, he would spend time with children. The leader of the world, he would spend time either with Hassan and Hussein or even children in society. He said, these are blessings. He would say, Rasulullah would say, learn from children. He said, Ya Rasulullah, what should we learn from children? He said, you can learn a lot from children. He said one thing, he said, children, today they get in a little argument, tomorrow they come back, they forgot about the argument, they're playing together again. He said, well, you don't have that. This principle that Rasulullah was telling people, you can learn a lot. They don't hold grudges for as long as you and I may hold grudges, for example. Anyways, he saw Abdullah, and Abdullah was doing something. He said, my son, what are you doing? He's come for condolences. He says, business, inshallah. So he was playing with what we may call monopoly money. Tijara. As you know, it's highly recommended in Islam. Business, tijara, is highly recommended in Islam. We have traditions that say that there are 10 parts of risk, 9/10 are in tijara, business, right, or trade. And so Rasulullah puts his hand, when he says that, Rasulullah puts his hand on his head and says, may Allah give you barakah in your business. And what barakah did Allah's messenger give him through that dua, that eventually he became the wealthiest person in Arabia, Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar. If countries needed loans at that time, they would take it from Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar. In fact, one of the reasons of the narrations say that Bibi Zainab went back to Sham is because Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar had so many properties there that he was checking on, for example. So Bibi Zainab comes into this house. But here's the real thing to think about. When people ask, should we have billionaires, not have billionaires, are we allowed to have wealth or not? It's not the question of that. The question is, as per the Quran, when you have the wealth, are you like Sulaiman or like Zaynab? Or are you like Fir'aun or Qarun or Shaddad or Haman? And that's the difference maker. That is, when everything was on the line, Bibi Zainab had everything. That's why in narrations actually, she's not called Saniya Zahra. We call her that. But according to the Prophet, she's called Saniya Khadija, the second coming of Khadija. Because Bibi Khadija, the wife of Rasulullah, who he loved so much, she also had everything. But when she left this world, she had nothing. To the point that Rasulullah wept that Bibi Zainab was like her grandmother in this, that what happened was, Bibi Khadija said to Bibi Fatima, my daughter, can you tell your father something? I don't want to say it to him. Can you please tell him? And she said, yes, my mother, what can I say? And she says to convey to him that, I tried to give everything in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the point that I'm in my last times, Shabi Abi Talib and all the challenges of the valley of Abu Talib, I don't have a kafan for myself. I don't have enough money for a shroud for myself. And this put tears into the eyes of Rasulullah. Similarly, Bibi Zainab was in a state where she had everything, yet when it came time to leave Medina and go towards Karbala, she gave up everything in an instant. You know how the similarities, Bibi Khadija shows us compassion in commerce. You want to know conscious capitalism as an example, just very quickly? At the start of the business season, during Hajj time, it was not only Hajj, it was also a moment for trade. People would descend there, and it was a central meeting spot for trade and commerce. Bibi Khadija had so much business power, she had so much leverage in the business space, that if she wanted, she could undercut everybody else in business. Undercut meaning she would set her prices so low, nobody else could compete with her. And so there would be no competition. She would essentially be a monopoly. That's how much bargaining power she had. So she would get a gathering at her place at the start of the season, and she would listen to all the grievances of all the merchants. And after she would listen to all the grievances of the merchants, she would set a base rate, which governments now say, like a minimum wage or a minimum price of commodities and things. She would do the same thing. She said, this is the base price, so that other people could compete. This granddaughter of hers, Zaynab salamullahi alayha, similarly showed what it means to have, but also to be willing to sacrifice it at the highest level. I'm leaving everything, but just know, if you want to know the story of Zaynab, it's reflected in the story of Sulaiman, it's reflected in the story of Ayub, it's reflected in the story of Yusuf. You can go down the line. It's reflected in the story of Maryam salamullahi alayha. It's reflected in story after story of the Quran. They mirror one another. Anyways, tonight is a night for Bibi Zainab. And Bibi Zainab is someone who gave everything for the Ahlul Bayt. And so we should not be surprised, perhaps, if the Ahlul Bayt would commemorate her. To the point, the narrations say that, I'll share one thing. I was in the vicinity in Najaf of Ayatollah Hafiz Bashir al-Najafi. And typically, when people come for ziyarah, they come to Najaf, where he was and other scholars are, and then they go on to Karbala often. And some of the other brothers may have been here as well. He, tabarrukan, as a gift, he often says, shall I recite for you the Masa'ib of Sayyid al-Shuhada, who you're going to visit, so that our hearts get acclimated to where we're going. This is a very amazing time we're living in. I can't tell you how many people I've met in person in New York, in Australia, in London, and how many social media clips I'm getting on a daily basis of people who are from our Ahl Sunnah brethren, who today, and sisters, who today are saying very clearly that we were not told fairly and justly the maqam of the Ahlul Bayt. You see, in all Muslims, this is not a Shia Sunni thing. There's Rasulullah, there's Ashab. And between Rasulullah and Ashab, there's Ahlul Bayt. Right after Rasulullah, there's Ahlul Bayt. And what now our brothers in Islam are realizing is their scholarship never told them about the distinction between Ahlul Bayt and Sahaba. The story was made out to be that Ahlul Bayt and Sahaba are the same, when in reality, all Muslim, Bukhari, you read Bukhari, you will understand, Bukhari, Muslim, you go down the line, you and I will recognize, and I'm not saying this, these are our brothers in Islam saying this, that we were told a lie or history was conveniently removed. And it's important for us to understand our own belief system so someone doesn't come to us and try to, in their sincerity, misguide us. They may be sincere, but they may not know history because they've not been told. So at this junction, that's why maybe Iqbal said this. Iqbal, who's known as Allama Iqbal, Iqbal Lahori. If you hear any of the Farsi speaking people, they call him Iqbal Lahori. And he's a Sunni, he's not a Shia, but he says, Hadith-e-Ishq. Iqbal's spiritual teacher is Rumi. He says, if you want to know who inspired me, it's Rumi. The same Iqbal says, Hadith-e-Ishq, the story of love. Love, which love? Divine love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, Hadith-e-Ishq, do bast, karbo bala o damishq. There are two gates to the story of love, divine love of Allah. He says, Yake Hussain rakam kar digare Zaynab. He says, one was written by Hussein, the other was written by Zainab. Why would he say this? One was written by Hussein, the other by Zainab. Because perhaps he knew, which was the wisdom that we now understand, that Zainab, without Zainab, Karbala's message is not complete. Why? Because it may never get to us. Because of the propaganda that was there. Having said that, Zainab is an ocean of spirituality, of courage, of audacity, of the Qur'an. She used to teach Qur'an in Medina. With whatever time that she had, women would gather in her home and she would teach them the Qur'an. And what lessons of Qur'an must those have been to be taught by the daughter of Babi Madinatul Ilm? An ocean. But coming back to Hafiz Bashir Najafi, he said, shall I recite? And he said, I want to tell you about the night of Sham-e Ghariban. He said, you know what the night of Sham-e Ghariban was? He said, it was a really dark night. And he said, on that night, Bibi Zainab would try to get the children who had scattered in the darkness of the land of Karbala. She tried to gather them together so they wouldn't be lost and they wouldn't run away into the battlefield. But you know, he says that she heard a cry here and she heard a cry there, and she would go after, running after the cries of the children. But he says, do you know that the ground of Karbala was not level? The sand of Karbala was not even. He said, so she would walk, and the narrations say that there would be a crater in the ground, or there would be a stone in the ground, or there would be something, and she would trip and fall onto the ground. And then she would get up, and then she would hear the sounds of the children, she would pursue them. This is how Zainab tried to gather the children. Ajrukum ala Allah. Zainab salamullahi alayha. She is that one last companion of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, who when all the Panjatan were there was someone there to support. That there was, the Imam Hassan was there when he was alive. Imam Hussein was there when he was alive. Imam Ali Amir al-Mu'mineen, when Rasulullah left, all the other Panjatan are there. When Bibi Fatima left, at least Imam Ali is there, Imam Hassan is there, Imam Hussein is there, Bibi Zainab is there. But Bibi Zainab is the one who was there through all of them. Bibi Zainab is now in a state where Hussein is leaving. And Hussein is leaving in such a state, in such an environment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. Do you know what they say? They say that the narrations say that according to some, when Bibi Zaynab had seen her brother being martyred and she knew what was there and what had happened and she knew of what would happen, some narrations say that she said that do not pass us, do not have us pass by the bodies of our loved ones. Allow us to go away from there. What state must they have been in? What state must have been that they would see them in that state? But they say that Shimr and those people, they did the most evil thing. They made them pass by the bodies of their loved ones, to the point that historians say that Bibi Zainab said a line for history. When she was passing by, she recognized one of the bodies. And when she recognized one of the bodies, may Allah never show any sister this day, she said a line for history that when she saw the body of her brother Imam al-Hussein, she said, "A'anta akhi," that are you my brother? Are you my brother? That she could not recognize the body of her beloved brother Imam al-Hussein. Ajrukum ala Allah. Azadaro, मैंने ख़त्म किया दो जुमले, ज़हमत तमाम यही ज़ैनब है जो दुनिया से जा रही है, मगर ज़ैनब ने किस किस इम्तिहान में ज़ैनब गुजरी है। ज़ैनब एक मरहला ये आया कि भाई के लाशे से गुजरी और फिर जुमला कहा, क्या तू ही मेरा भाई है? खुदा किसी भी बहन को ये मंजर न दिखाए, मगर ज़ैनब ने इससे ज़्यादा क़यामत देखी थी। वो कौन सी क़यामत थी? वो क़यामत थी कि जब शिमर हुसैन इब्न अली के सीने पे सवार था और 13 ज़रबें हल्कों में सिबते पैगंबर पे वो लाइन मार रहा था। ज़ैनब तिलाए ज़ैनबिया से खड़ी देख रही थी, कहा पिसरे साद मेरा माजाया ज़िबा हो रहा है, तू खड़ा देख रहा है। ज़ैनब ने ये मंजर भी देखा, खुदा किसी को ये मंजर न दिखाए। अला लानतुल्लाहि अलल क़ौमिज़ ज़ालिमीन وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله صلى الله عليك يا أمير المؤمنين صلى الله عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين صلى الله عليك يا حسن المجتبى السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. معتم حسين يا حسين 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 حسين
घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, भैया जाके कहाँ पाएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, परदेस है गुर्बत है कहाँ जाएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबरा घबराएगी ज़ैनब। तुम सानिए ज़हरा की गरीबी को समझना, गाजी की कसम है तुम्हें भाई ना तड़पना। बेपर्दा तेरी लाश पे जब आएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब। किस तरह गुजारूंगी क़यामत का वो लम्हा, जब शाम गरीबा में मेरा साथ न होगा। बाबा से निगाहें न मिला पाएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब। इंसाफ करो कैसे बहन दिल को संभाले, इस गूंज का एहसास मुझे मार न डाले। बागी की बहन शाम में कहलाएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब। तुम मेरी तरह गम ये अकेले ही सहोगे, वादा करो ये बात न बानों से कहोगे। जिंदा में सकीना को जो दफनाएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब। देखी नहीं जाएगी वो मायूस निगाहें, सुगरा जो उसे देती है जीने की दुआएं। अकबर के बिना जब भी वतन जाएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब। क्या क्या हुआ बाजार में बतलाऊंगी कैसे, अब्दुल्ला ये जाफर को मैं समझाऊंगी कैसे। जब नील रसन के उन्हें दिखलाएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब, घबराएगी ज़ैनब। बावाज़ बुलंदतर सलावत।
अस्सलामु अलैकुम या अबा अब्दिल्लाह وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعل الله آخر عهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا غريب الغرباء السلطان أبا الحسن مولانا علي بن موسى الرضا، كن شفيعنا شفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا صاحب والزمان الأمان الأمان الأمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
اللهم كن لوليك حجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.